Picture a machine longer than a Boeing 747, heavier than a fully loaded passenger jet. And it's flying, but not up in the sky where it belongs. It's skimming the surface of the sea, so low its wings are almost slapping the waves, 10 feet above the water. Not because it wanted to, because that was where the machine made sense. It looks like a crashed plane that somehow forgot to fall. A jumbo jet trapped just above the ocean, unable to climb out. But here's the thing. It wasn't broken. It wasn't struggling. It was doing exactly what it was built to do. This is the story of a giant Soviet machine that looked like an airplane, moved like a ship, and could only exist because of a strange physics trick that lives in one thin sliver of air right above the water. By the end, you'll understand why flying lower actually made it better, and why that same trick is the reason it was doomed.
This Soviet creation has been dubbed the Caspian Sea Monster. Its designers believe the Ekranoplan, a low-flying ground effect craft, could ultimately replace cargo ships and ferries.
Western intelligence first spotted it in grainy satellite photos in the 1960s. A huge gray vehicle sitting on the Caspian Sea that was clearly enormous, clearly fast, and made no sense at all. They didn't know what it was, so they nicknamed it the Caspian Sea Monster, and the name stuck because the thing was gigantic in every direction. So what was it really? A plane that lands on water? Or a ship that grew wings? The honest answer is neither, and both. Picture a 6-story apartment building lying on its side, floating in the sea, with jet engines bolted near the front of it. That's roughly the size and shape we're dealing with. A long hull that sat in the water like a boat. Short, stubby wings that looked far too small for something so heavy. And a cluster of engines mounted up near the nose. Those tiny wings are your first clue that something strange is going on. A normal airplane that size would need vast, sweeping wings to drag itself into the sky. This flying ship had wings that looked almost laughably short, because it was never trying to reach the sky. It was trying to live just above the water. And down there, the rules are completely different. Now, before we watch it move, you have to understand the strange in-between space this machine was trying to live in. Because it was stuck between two worlds that have never gotten along. On one side, you have ships. A ship is slow for one brutal reason. Water is heavy, incredibly heavy. It's roughly 800 times denser than air. So when a ship moves, it isn't gliding. It's shoving an endless wall of liquid out of its way every single second. Look at the bow of a cargo vessel, and you'll see it. That permanent mountain of white water piling up at the front. That wave is the ship losing the fight. It's like being forced to bulldoze a hill of water uphill, forever, just to keep moving. That's why even the most powerful ships crawl across the ocean. On the other side, you have airplanes. Planes solve that problem by leaving the water entirely. Up in the air, the resistance is a tiny fraction of what water throws at you. The difference is like wading through a swimming pool versus walking through an empty room. One fights you, one barely touches you, but escaping into the air has its own price. To hold all that weight up in thin air, a plane needs enormous wings. And to fly efficiently, it has to climb miles into the sky, into thinner air, which takes huge amounts of power just to reach. So you're stuck with a choice. Stay low and fight the water like a ship, or climb high and pay for giant wings and altitude like a plane. The Ekranoplan tried to do something nobody else dared. It tried to live in the crack between those two worlds. It wanted the low resistance of air without ever paying the full cost of altitude. It wanted to skim just above the sea, escaping the water's grip. While staying so low, it never had to truly climb. It was walking a tightrope strung between a boat and a plane. And as you're about to see, that rope was powerful, but it was almost impossibly narrow. Let's start where the machine starts, sitting still on the surface of the sea. At rest, it's just a very heavy boat. Hundreds of tons of metal floating on its hull, going absolutely nowhere. A massive gray shape resting on the water like a beached whale. To get moving, The engines roar to life. And this is where the first brutal problem hits. Water does not want to let go. Think about wading into the ocean. Walking on dry sand is easy, but try to sprint through waist-deep water, and your legs feel trapped in wet cement. Every step is a war. That clinging resistance is exactly what the hull faces as it tries to claw its way up to speed. So the engineers did something genuinely clever. They angled some of the engines, so their exhaust blasted underneath the wings. That jet of air slammed into the space beneath the body and built up pressure, physically shoving the entire machine upward and breaking the hull free of the water's grip. They were ramming a cushion of air under the vehicle to peel it off the sea, and the instant it broke free, everything changed. The crushing drag of the water vanished. The 500-ton aircraft surged forward, faster and faster. The hull lifting clear of the surface, spray tearing off behind it. That's why the hardest part of the whole journey happens before it ever truly flies. Getting unstuck from the sea is the real battle. Once it's loose, the machine is free. Now we reach the heart of it. The trick. The reason this entire impossible thing works at all. It's called ground effect. And it's the single most important idea in this whole story. Here's what's happening. When any wing flies, it pushes air downward to hold itself up. But it also leaks. Air spills off the ends of the wings and curls into spinning whirlpools called vortices. Those swirls are pure waste. They create drag and quietly steal lift. On a normal high-flying plane, you just accept them as the cost of doing business. But fly that same wing very low, just a few feet above a flat surface, and something remarkable happens. The surface gets in the way of those escaping swirls. The air can no longer spill off the wingtips and curl away. Instead, it gets trapped and squeezed into a dense, high-pressure cushion right underneath the wing. That cushion does two beautiful things at once. It pushes upward harder, giving extra lift, and it strangles those wasteful vortices, slashing the drag. Think of an air hockey puck. On a bare table, it would scrape and stop almost instantly. But riding on that thin layer of trapped air, it glides across the surface forever, with barely any resistance at all. That's what the wave-skimming vehicle was doing, riding its own cushion of pressurized air pinned between its wings and the sea. The payoff was incredible. It could carry enormous weight, burn far less fuel than a normal aircraft, and move at airplane-like speeds, all while hugging the waves. Down inside that cushion, those tiny stubby wings suddenly worked like wings 3 times their size. Flying lower made it more efficient, which sounds completely backwards. And that's the part that breaks everyone's common sense. We all assume altitude is good. Higher is safer. If a plane has trouble, it climbs to buy itself time and room to recover. Height is your friend. But for this giant plane, height was the enemy. The cushion of trapped air only exists very close to the surface. Climb too high, and you rise right out of it. The moment you do, the magic collapses. The vortices come roaring back. The drag returns with a vengeance. The lift drains away. And now those tiny wings are suddenly far too small to hold up all that weight, because they were never built to fly without the cushion in the first place. So this machine, capable of moving like a jet, was effectively imprisoned at around 10 feet above the water. It was like owning a car faster than a Ferrari, but only as long as you never ever leave one specific painted lane on the road. Drift out of the lane, and the advantage doesn't just fade. It disappears instantly. The Ekranoplan didn't fly low because it couldn't go higher. It flew low because low was the only place it could survive. And living inside that trap was terrifying. Start with turning. On a normal airplane, you turn by banking. You tilt the whole aircraft and dip one wing toward the ground. At 30,000 feet, that's perfectly safe. You've got miles of empty air below you. But this thing was flying 10 feet above the sea. Dip a wingtip even slightly, and you're not banking. You're driving a wing straight into the water at hundreds of miles an hour. So every turn had to be flat, wide, and painfully gentle. Imagine steering a city bus at highway speed through a tunnel only a few inches wider than the bus itself. Touch either wall, and it's over. That's what every turn felt like. The ocean was always right there, just beneath the wingtips, waiting. Then there's the surface itself. The whole trick depends on a flat, predictable surface to trap that air cushion against. On a calm, glassy sea, it was perfect. The cushion held firm, and the machine glided like a dream. But the sea is rarely glassy. When the waves grew tall, they began punching up into the cushion, scrambling the pressure, hammering the hull from below. It's the difference between skateboarding across smooth glass and skateboarding across cobblestones. Same board, but on the rough surface, every bump is a violent jolt, and control slips away fast. Big waves didn't just make the ride rough. They could shrink the safe flying zone to almost nothing, or shatter the cushion entirely. The exact same physics that gave this aircraft its power also made it fragile. And then there were obstacles. A normal plane that spots a ship, an island, or a storm simply climbs over it. This machine couldn't. It was locked at wave-top height. It couldn't simply climb over traffic, islands, or storms the way a normal aircraft could. It couldn't rise above a rocky island. It couldn't go up and over a storm front the way an airliner does. Whatever sat in front of it at 10 feet had to be dealt with at 10 feet. So now you can see the full picture of the problem. Here was a machine that drank fuel like a jet, yet was trapped at the height of a basketball hoop above the water. It could haul massive loads at thrilling speed, but only over calm seas, only in a gentle straight-ish line, only when nothing dared to get in its way. It couldn't climb over land. It couldn't dodge a ship. It couldn't ride out a storm by going high. It was a brilliant answer searching for a question narrow enough to fit it. And that question turned out to be very, very small. So the giant flying ships were mostly retired. The original Caspian Sea Monster eventually went down during a failed test and was lost beneath the surface. The grand dream of fleets of these vehicles racing across the world's oceans quietly faded away. But here's what most people get completely wrong. The physics never failed. The physics was real, and it's still all around you. That same ground effect is exactly why a pelican can glide endlessly, just inches above the ocean, without flapping its wings, riding the cushion between its body and the water, in precisely the way that Soviet machine did. Race cars use a flipped version of the same idea, using the ground to suck themselves down for extra grip. And engineers today are still sketching out cargo vehicles built around this exact principle, trying to finally crack the problem the Ekranoplan couldn't. It was never a failed airplane. It was a machine that mastered a sliver of sky no one else could reach, and got trapped there by the very thing that made it brilliant. So the next time you watch a seabird skim the waves without lifting a single feather, you're watching the same invisible cushion of air that once held up a 500-ton giant. The pelican just figured it out first and made it look effortless. Which leaves one strange question hanging in the air. If you can use the surface of the water to hold a machine up, can you also use the water to lift an entire ship completely out of the sea until it's barely touching the surface at all? Because that's exactly what a hydrofoil does. And the physics that lets a heavy ship rise up and fly across the water is every bit as sneaky as the trick you just saw. That's the machine we're taking apart next.